The courtroom fell into an expectant hush the moment the heavy oak doors swung open. Every eye was fixed on the figure entering, Sean "Diddy" Combs, flanked by two burly bailiffs and a cadre of attorneys whose suits had clearly been tailored for this solemn occasion. For years, Diddy had been a titan of music and business, a man whose swagger could fill entire arenas. Yet today, beneath his dark sunglasses, there was a flicker of uncertainty. As he strode toward the defense table, the chatter among onlookers shifted from hushed gossip to a collective intake of breath. They whispered of shocking new allegations, financial misconduct, witness intimidation, and the unauthorized use of charity funds. Rumors swirled that Judge Frank Caprio, renowned for his compassion and unorthodox courtroom style, was preparing a bold maneuver that would leave everyone reeling. The faint click of pens paused mid-air, phones were lowered, and even the gallery's restless children sat rigidly in their seats. No one knew exactly what to expect, but one thing was certain. By the end of this hearing, the entire courtroom would be changed forever. The courtroom's atmosphere, charged moments ago by the gravity of the charges, softened slightly as the bailiff approached the back door to guide the defendant forward. The bailiff, a burly man named Carl Ramirez, with a quick grin and an ever-present stir of humor, strode down the aisle, announcing in a low but audible voice, "Mr. Combs, if you're ready, we'll proceed." Attention snapped back to the aisle. Diddy, dressed in a tailored dark navy suit that contrasted sharply with his usual flamboyant stage persona, stood and smoothed the lapels of his jacket. The hall was lit by overhead lights that cast everyone in a pale glow, accentuating each crease in his suit and the crisp lines of the white undershirt beneath. His fedora, which he often wore slanted to the side in concerts and music videos, had been replaced today by a simple black baseball cap worn low over his brow. The transition from celebrity spotlight to courtroom reality was jarring. No sunglasses, no entourage of more than one attorney by his side, no flashbulbs popping. As Diddy moved forward, the wooden floorboards creaked beneath polished shoes. He walked with measured steps, each one echoing as though testing the weight of every incoming stare. He offered a small nod to Judge Caprio, a gesture that was polite but not overly deferential. It said, "I acknowledge your presence, Your Honor," but held no hint of intimidation. The jury box remained empty, but the gallery was packed. Journalists huddled at the back, legal observers scribbled notes, and a scattering of fans and concerned onlookers sat in quiet curiosity. Beyond the public seats, near the door, sat Naomi Combs, Diddy's younger sister. She wore a simple cream blouse and black slacks. Her hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing an earnest face that betrayed worry more than anger. Once Diddy reached the defendant's table, he paused and allowed his one remaining attorney, Gordon Ellis, a trim man with grease paint black hair stuck to his scalp by perspiration, to adjust the microphone's angle. Ellis whispered something brief into Diddy's ear, likely a reminder that despite his fame, today he was just another defendant. Diddy closed his eyes for a heartbeat, then reopened them, letting his gaze sweep the courtroom slowly before taking a seat. As he sat, he glanced at his own reflection in the polished wood of the desk, straightened his back, and folded his hands neatly atop his briefcase. For a moment, the only sound was the soft rustle of paper as the court reporter readied her stenography machine. Judge Caprio watched from the bench, his expression a balance of solemnity and curiosity. His silver hair, trimmed short, shone under the lights, and faint lines at the corners of his eyes crinkled slightly as he regarded Diddy, looking almost paternal in the way he held his gaze. Beside Diddy, Ellis began organizing a stack of exhibits, graphs of financial records, copies of wire transfers, printed emails. There was also a small photograph tucked among the papers, showing Diddy at a charitable fundraiser last spring, standing beside children in matching t-shirts that read, "Combs Foundation, Hope for All." That image symbolized two contrasting stories, one of generosity, another of suspicion. In the gallery's front row sat various witnesses, some wearing company badges from the Combs Foundation, others in casual attire. A few recognized Diddy instantly and whispered among themselves, "He looks uneasy. I can't believe this is really happening. Is that really Diddy?" The subdued buzz of conversations filled the air until Judge Caprio's gavel rapped softly, punctuating the hush. "Good morning, Mr. Combs," Judge Caprio said in his warm, deliberate tone. "Before we begin, I'd like to know if you are comfortable with the proceedings today, and if you have any concerns I can address immediately." Diddy lifted his shoulders in a slight shrug. His voice, when he spoke, was low but steady. "Your Honor, I appreciate the chance to speak. I'm here to answer the charges brought against me. I've spent my life building a reputation for giving back to the community. It's been a source of pride. I may not be perfect, but I'm not a criminal. I came today ready to defend my integrity." The judge inclined his head, acknowledging Diddy's statement. Then, to break the tension, Judge Caprio tilted sideways, allowed a soft smile to emerge. "Mr. Combs, I understand your concern. We'll approach this carefully, and you'll have ample opportunity to present your side. But let's remember, this is a place of truth, fairness, and, yes, sometimes mercy. Now, Mr. Ellis, are you ready to proceed?" Gordon Ellis cleared his throat, setting aside a sheaf of papers. "Yes, Your Honor." He glanced at Diddy and offered a nearly imperceptible nod, both encouragement and a reminder of the task at hand. Behind Diddy, the courtroom doors swung open again to admit ADA Lisa Hernandez, a poised figure in a charcoal gray pantsuit, carrying her own large binder of evidence. Her presence added a sense of professionalism tinged with determination. She was here to prove that even a superstar could not escape the law's scrutiny. As she passed the clerk's table, she exchanged a brief, respectful nod with Judge Caprio. Moments later, the clerk rose and cleared her throat. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Frank Caprio." The court stood. The shuffle of raised chairs and shifting feet was audible. Judge Caprio took his seat once more, and as the room settled, Diddy shifted forward. In those first few minutes, the introductions, though brief, revealed character details. Diddy's humility masked by tension, Ellis's quiet confidence tinged with anxiety, Hernandez's unwavering determination, and Judge Caprio's calm, fatherly authority. Light humor flickered through Diddy's earlier remarks, but now the humor had given way to seriousness. The audience leaned in, aware that behind the polished veneer of a celebrity lifestyle lurked a story that would test notions of privilege, responsibility, and what happens when trust is broken. As the introductions concluded, Judge Caprio cleared his throat gently. "Let us proceed with the state's case. Ms. Hernandez, you may call your first witness." At that cue, Diddy straightened in his seat, bracing himself. The moment had arrived for the true challenge, facing the evidence, testimony, and potentially his own mistakes. The next 3 hours would revolve around that confrontation, an uneasy collision between celebrity, charity, and the pursuit of justice. The courtroom door creaked once more, and Assistant District Attorney Lisa Hernandez rose with practiced poise. She adjusted her glasses and addressed the bench. "Your Honor, the state's case will establish that Sean Combs, known publicly as Diddy, misappropriated funds from the Combs Foundation, a charitable organization he controlled. To do so, we will present testimony from financial experts, former employees, and documentary evidence including bank statements and emails. We ask that the court receive the evidence and find that Mr. Combs diverted over $500,000 from the foundation's intended beneficiaries. Judge Caprio nodded, his serene expression conveying both gravity and openness. "Ms. Hernandez, I will hear your witnesses. Proceed." Hernandez turned to the gallery and called, "Our first witness, Benjamin Anderson, the former chief financial officer of the Combs Foundation." A hush fell. Anderson, a man in his early 40s with neatly combed brown hair that framed a solemn face, stood from the front bench and approached the witness stand. He took a seat, adjusted the microphone, and placed both palms flat on the rail. "Please state your full name for the record," Hernandez instructed. "Benjamin Andrew Anderson." He nodded. "And your role at the foundation?" "For 2 years, I served as the CFO. I oversaw all financial transactions, prepared budgets, and reported directly to Mr. Combs regarding the foundation's financial health." He glanced briefly at Diddy, who remained still, face inscrutable. Hernandez produced a stack of documents. "Mr. Anderson, on or about August 12th of last year, did you notice any unusual transfers from the foundation's primary account?" Anderson's jaw tightened. "Yes. There was a transfer of $200,000 sent to an account named N. Combs Ventures, with only a memo line reading, 'Project Funding.' There was no project outlined, no invoices, no supporting documentation indicating it was a legitimate charitable expense." Judge Caprio leaned forward. "Mr. Anderson, did you raise these concerns with Mr. Combs directly?" "Several times," Anderson replied. "Initially, I approached him about unexplained transfers in June. He told me that the board had approved the transfers for special marketing initiatives tied to the foundation's expansion efforts. But when I asked for meeting minutes or approval forms, I was told those details were confidential or misplaced. The second time, in July, I asked his business manager. I was told not to worry, that Mr. Combs had full authority to redirect funds as he saw fit." Ellis rose for cross-examination. "Mr. Anderson, are you absolutely certain that these transfers did not contribute to legitimate charitable outcomes?" Anderson nodded firmly. "I reviewed all beneficiary statements. None of the children's programs, none of the medical outreach missions received funds commensurate with the sums you're describing. I confirmed that with program directors. They reported shortfalls, and some events were underfunded because the money I documented as missing never arrived in their accounts." Ellis pursed his lips and glanced at Diddy, whose fingers drummed lightly on the table. "Do you have any direct evidence linking Mr. Combs to the authorization of those transfers?" Anderson exhaled, his gaze flicking momentarily to the gallery. "I have emails from Mr. Combs's executive assistant forwarding instructions to the bank to initiate the transfers. The signature lines read, 'Approved by SC,' which refers to Mr. Combs. I also have screenshots of text messages that say, 'Authorize the $200,000 for project advancement,' sent from his phone number." With that, Ellis sat. Hernandez collected the binder, then called the next witness. Cynthia Lawson, volunteer coordinator for the Foundation's flagship events. Lawson, in her late 20s, approached barefoot, an unconventional habit she maintained for comfort. She hesitated at the podium for a moment, eyes downcast, then spoke. "Ms. Lawson, could you describe your interactions with the Foundation regarding event funding?" Hernandez asked. "I organized weekly volunteer distributions, fundraising drives, and large-scale charity galas. In early September, I was asked to submit an invoice for $50,000 for promotional materials, flyers, banners, a press release. However, when we printed the materials, it cost only $15,000. There was no need for $50,000. Judge Caprio tilted his head, fingers steepled. "Ms. Lawson, did you bring this discrepancy to anyone's attention?" She looked toward Diddy's table. "I mentioned it to Gordon Ellis and then to Mr. Combs himself. I said, "This seems excessive. Shouldn't we double-check the numbers?" He smiled politely and said, "Cynthia, trust our vendor. They have different costs because of volume and shipping." After that, he left it at that. Her voice shook slightly. But when the gala came, there were fewer decorations, and the press release never circulated. We had to borrow a team from another nonprofit to distribute flyers because our budget had been spent. Ellis rose, exhaling. "Ms. Lawson, are you suggesting Mr. Combs personally instructed you to pay $50,000 for non-existent materials?" Cynthia straightened. "No, sir. I'm saying I was told to get the money, despite reporting lower costs. I don't know who pocketed the difference, but the money never went to any charity purpose I saw." Judge Caprio nodded. "Thank you. Please step down." As Lawson returned to her seat, Detective Marcus Blake approached with a laptop displaying scanned documents. A projector behind him flicked on, illuminating a montage of screenshots. An email thread where the CFO forwarded false invoices, a photocopy of a signed check made out to a shell company, and snippets of text messages. The images glowed on the screen behind Diddy, casting long, ghostly reflections on the wood paneling. Detective Blake began narrating. "Your Honor, we have here an exhibit marked A1, a scanned PDF of the August 12th bank transfer. Exhibit A2 shows the email from the CFO to the bank officer. Exhibit A3 is a text message from a number registered under Mr. Combs's name, directing, 'Please initiate the $200,000 transfer ASAP for project advancement.' We will also show Exhibit B, the false invoice from Global Media Promotions, which itemizes printing costs that far exceed market rates." Audience members leaned forward, some squinting at the screen, as the evidence laid bare a pattern. Large sums leaving the charitable coffers without paper trails pointing to any actual charitable expenditures. Hernandez closed her binder and turned to Judge Caprio. "Your Honor, we will rest our case, pending further testimony." Ellis rose to object. "Your Honor, we'd like to challenge the authenticity of Exhibit A3. The text message could have been fabricated by the CFO to implicate Mr. Combs. We request forensic analysis of the phone." He turned to Diddy. "Are you aware of any such message? Did you send it?" Diddy's jaw clenched. He said, "I don't recall sending any text like that. My phone was handled by many staff members. If something came from my number, I'd need to see the details." Judge Caprio nodded. "Very well. We will subpoena the phone records for verification. Detective Blake, please ensure a forensic copy is made of Mr. Combs's phone data. In the meantime, let the record show that the defense has requested authentication. We will reconvene after a short recess to confirm Exhibit A3. The gavel came down gently. As the courtroom stood, the gallery stirred. A ripple of conversation trailed through, speculating on whether the phone data would confirm or deny the text's origin. Reporters flipped on their recorders. Jurors, though not present in this bench trial, would be updated on these developments. The tension remained palpable as everyone prepared for the evidence verification. When the doors reopened after the recess, the court resumed with a shift in atmosphere, a sense of anticipation mixed with a flicker of empathy. Judge Caprio had a contemplative expression, as though he'd weighed the cold facts against intangible human elements. Before resuming testimony on financial evidence, he decided to introduce a witness whose insights would add context. Diddy's younger sister, Naomi Combs. No one had expected this twist. Diddy's public image had always been tightly managed. Rarely did family members testify in high-profile trials. But today, Naomi stood, hands clasped, as she took the witness stand. The gallery fell silent. Under the bright ceiling lights, she looked fragile, yet resolute. Despite her slender frame, Her presence carried the weight of familial loyalty. Judge Caprio began gently. "Ms. Combs, you have been called to provide background on your brother's character and philanthropic history. Please tell the court what you know." Naomi's voice was calm, but quivered at the edges. "Thank you, Your Honor. I grew up with my brother in a modest household in New York. Our father worked multiple jobs to support us, and our mother held us together with love. Sean, he didn't just dream of success, he worked for it. He sold mixtapes on street corners, produced tracks for fellow artists, and eventually built a career that took him around the world. But even at the height of his fame, he never forgot where he came from." A hush fell. Some spectators wiped their eyes, others sat with hands over their faces, sensing the deeper narrative. Hernandez sat forward, expression unreadable, while Ellis quietly nodded in encouragement. Naomi continued. "When Sean started the Combs Foundation, it wasn't for publicity. He told me once, 'Nomi, if I can help one child see a doctor or go to school, I'll sleep well at night.' I witnessed him personally deliver meals at a homeless shelter, then head to the studio at midnight to finish a remix. He always believed his wealth should heal others' wounds." A single tear rolled down her cheek. Judge Caprio observed gently, "Ms. Combs, can you tell us about any signs you saw that your brother might have been under pressure within his foundation?" Naomi inhaled deeply, glancing at Diddy as if seeking permission to speak her truth. He gave her a subtle nod. She resumed. "After our father died, Sean felt responsible for our entire family, our mom, our younger siblings, and even extended relatives who looked to him for help. He poured his heart into the foundation. He trusted his CFO, Mr. Anderson, implicitly. I remember seeing them argue once on the phone. Diddy was frustrated because beneficiaries were complaining they hadn't received promised support. He called Anderson and asked, 'Why aren't the funds getting there?' Anderson told him that everything was under control, but Sean knew something didn't add up. Yet each time he tried to investigate further, he was told to focus on the bigger picture." A murmur ran through the gallery. The notion that Diddy, the mastermind himself, had been kept in the dark about financial irregularities cast him in a new light. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Naomi as though drinking every word. Judge Caprio watched both siblings intently. "Ms. Combs, were you ever aware of Mr. Combs directing any of these withdrawals personally?" "No, Your Honor," Naomi replied. "He trusted his team. He believed they shared his mission. He never saw the manipulations Anderson was orchestrating behind his back. As the foundation's public face, he assumed the finances were managed ethically." Her shoulders trembled. "When I heard allegations, I couldn't believe it. I thought, who would betray him? Who would use his good name to steal from the needy?" Ellis rose to cross-examine Softy. "Ms. Combs, why did you decide to come forward now, at this critical time?" She paused, glancing sideways at her brother. "Because someone needed to speak on his behalf before judgments were made solely on numbers and transactions. You see the evidence, emails, bank transfers. But I've lived with this man every day. I know his heart. I know he wouldn't risk his reputation or his legacy just for personal gain." Her gaze darted toward the prosecution table. "I know the evidence seems damning, but I stand here to say that the person behind those emails is not him." Hernandez stood to object. "Your Honor, while Ms. Combs's testimony is touching, we must remember that we are here to evaluate evidence of misappropriation. Personal anecdotes cannot override documented proof." Judge Caprio raised a finger, motioning for calm. "I appreciate your objection, Ms. Hernandez. However, character witnesses have always played a role in trials where intent is a key factor. Ms. Combs is not here to dispute facts, but to provide context about her brother's character and possible state of mind. As Hernandez sat, reflecting on the judge's ruling, a shift in the courtroom's energy was palpable. The tension transformed into a mixture of sorrow, empathy, and cautious optimism. Naomi took a final breath. "Your Honor, I ask you to consider that if my brother truly intended to steal from the foundation, he would have done it personally and hidden it better. Instead, he used his resources to help countless families. If someone betrayed him from within, it's not fair to punish him as if he were the only culprit." There was a moment of silence as all compassed Naomi's words. Then Judge Caprio gently replied, "Thank you, Ms. Combs. You may step down." She left the stand, walking past her brother, who offered her a grateful nod. As she returned to her seat, several heads turned in her direction, some in admiration, others in thoughtful consideration. Detective Blake approached next with additional evidence confirming the origins of the suspicious transactions, but the court allowed a brief pause. Judge Caprio took off his glasses and rubbed his temples. He spoke softly. "The court has heard character testimony that complicates the straightforward narrative suggested by documentary evidence. We will now verify the provenance of the contested text messages and emails. Once we confirm or refute their authenticity, we can proceed to assess the full context of these alleged misappropriations." The judge called another short recess. As the doors closed behind him, one reporter whispered into a recorder, "This is a case of talent, philanthropy, and betrayal. If the CFO is to blame, Diddy's entire legacy could be revived. The twist this court just witnessed may change everything." Back in chambers for a moment of reflection, Judge Caprio considered the swirling emotions: a superstar's fall from grace, a sister's tearful plea, a community's trust shaken. He knew that once the truth about the text messages emerged, the balance of the case would tilt again, either cementing Diddy as a reckless miscreant or unveiling a more sinister betrayal by a trusted aide. When the courtroom reconvened, it carried a different weight. Spectators who had lingered outside filed back in, taking their seats quietly. Even photographers, ordered to remain silent, seemed to sense that the afternoon's proceedings would transcend ordinary legal argument. Judge Caprio returned, carefully placed his gavel on the bench, and peered out at Diddy, who sat upright but visibly drained. He cleared his throat gently. "Before we proceed to the matter of authentication, I wish to pause and reflect on a broader question. What does justice demand when a person's intent clashes with the appearance of wrongdoing? Mr. Combs, you have built a reputation as a benefactor, someone who uses his resources to uplift others. Today, the state alleges that you abuse that position. However, the testimony we've heard suggests you may have been a victim, rather than the orchestrator, of misappropriation." He paused, folding his hands. "We must ask ourselves, what is the ultimate purpose of this trial? Is it solely punitive, to assign blame and impose fines? Or does it also serve as a process of discovery, uncovering truths that might absolve an innocent party falsely accused?" Diddy's head dipped slightly, his expression a mixture of guilt and relief. He kept his eyes down, as though willing himself to listen. Gordon Ellis sat beside him, pen in hand, prepared to take notes on the judge's reflections. Ada Hernandez and her team watched warily, prepared to argue that regardless of motive, a leader must bear responsibility for the actions of those under his direction. Continuing, Judge Caprio spoke, his tone measured. "In my years on the bench, I have encountered two distinct kinds of cases: those where individuals intentionally break the law for personal enrichment, and those where mistakes cascade into criminal violations despite benign intent. The public often struggles to differentiate between the two, especially when the scale of alleged misdeeds is large. When $500,000 vanish from a charity, it is easy to assume the worst." He leaned forward, chin resting on his clasped fingers. Perhaps the most challenging cases involve well-known figures. When a celebrity is implicated, trust evaporates quickly because fans and donors feel betrayed on a mass scale. Yet, we cannot convict a person based solely on his public persona or past generosity. We must delve deeper into the reasoning behind each transaction and consider whether Mr. Combs knowingly participated in wrongdoing. Judge Caprio's eyes traveled slowly from the prosecution bench to Diddy's seat. Ms. Hernandez, the state bears the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Combs deliberately ordered misappropriation. If evidence shows he was misled by his CFO, does that not alter the moral calculus? The law seeks both accountability and fairness. Hernandez rose, ready to respond. Your Honor, while we acknowledge that intent is a crucial element, the Foundation's finances are ultimately Mr. Combs's responsibility. As the principal, he must ensure his staff acts ethically. Even if he was deceived, the gravity of the missing funds demands scrutiny of his oversight, or lack thereof. Judge Caprio nodded. I understand. Yet consider this. If someone in his inner circle can fabricate false invoices, direct money to shell accounts, and manipulate even Mr. Combs' own phone number to create incriminating messages, does that not speak to a deeper betrayal? The question becomes, should the court punish the victim of deception as harshly as the one who orchestrated it? Hernandez hesitated, nodding reluctantly. The state will ensure that all responsible parties are held accountable. If evidence exonerates Mr. Combs, if the texts indeed originated with the CFO, then our focus should shift. We would still need to address any oversights, but not with the same severity as a deliberate fraud. Diddy sat up a bit straighter, relief flickering in his eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but Judge Caprio placed a soft finger on his lips. I sense you wish to clarify something, Mr. Combs. Hold that thought. You will have your opportunity. For now, let me continue. The judge stood and began to pace gently behind the bench. This case also raises a broader moral question. When someone devotes significant resources and time to philanthropic endeavors, does that grant immunity from basic oversight? Or is it a double-edged sword, where the very act of generosity obscures the need for vigilance? I have presided over cases where charitable organizations faltered because founders assumed goodwill would suffice. He paused mid-sentence and addressed the gallery. Charity, by its nature, demands trust, that donations will be used for intended purposes, that funds will not vanish in administrative overhead or poor accounting. That trust must be earned daily through transparency, regular audits, and accountability measures. When that system breaks down, intentionally or not, people can suffer. Those children awaiting medical care, the families expecting housing assistance, they deserve to know the truth. A murmur rippled through the audience. Parents who saw their own children in the photographs treated by the foundation exchanged worried glances, unsure if the help they relied upon would reappear. Judge Caprio's reflection took on greater depth. Yet, we must remember that punishment without context can sow resentment. If we punish someone who sincerely believed in his mission, someone who spent millions on philanthropic deeds, without acknowledging his intent and contributions, we risk setting a precedent that fame carries no presumption of innocence. A member of the press scribbled furious notes. Fellow onlookers leaned forward, hanging on every word. The tension was not merely legal, but philosophical. How to balance the letter of the law with the spirit of compassion. Finishing his pacing, Judge Caprio returned to the bench. I will permit the defense to present evidence of Mr. Combs's good faith efforts, so long as the prosecution consents to present further evidence if necessary. I anticipate that this trial's outcome will hinge not only on documented transactions, but also on the moral questions they provoke. Can we hold someone accountable for a betrayal they were unaware of? Or does justice demand a degree of compassion and restoration? He took a steadying breath. We will now verify the authenticity of the contested messages and continue with additional testimony. I invite both sides to consider these moral dimensions as they present their arguments. Let justice be blind to reputation, but let it not be deaf to intent. Hernandez and Ellis exchanged quick glances. Both recognized that the judge's reflection would influence how vigorously they pursued or deflected certain lines of inquiry. Diddy sank back in his seat, shoulders already seeming lighter. Perhaps he sensed a shift toward a fairer evaluation of his actions and motives. The judge rapped his gavel. Proceed to address the authentication issue. The court will reconvene after. He rose and signaled for Detective Blake to come forward with the phone records and forensic analysis. Detective Marcus Blake stood, holding a sealed evidence bag containing a brand new forensic copy of Diddy's primary cell phone. The phone, still in its protective casing, glinted under the courtroom lights. Blake's face was stoic. He had spent the past hour cross-referencing timestamps, verifying metadata, and consulting digital logs. Now he approached Judge Caprio's bench. Your Honor, we have completed the forensic analysis of Exhibit A3, the text messages allegedly sent from Mr. Combs's phone to initiate the $200,000 transfer. The results confirm that those messages were not drafted or transmitted from Mr. Combs's device. Instead, they originated from an IP address linked to the office computer of the Foundation's CFO, Mr. Anderson. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Hernandez's jaw visibly dropped. Ellis's eyes gleamed with a mixture of vindication and hope. The gallery held its collective breath as Judge Caprio absorbed the revelation. Please continue, Detective, the judge said. Blake swiveled the projector to display side-by-side screenshots. On the left, the seed text purportedly from Diddy's number. On the right, the same message rife with digital fingerprints connecting it to the CFO's computer network. Beneath them, lines of code from the forensic tool highlighted anomalies. The message's hash signature did not match the phone's messaging app. The timestamp of 3:14 p.m. on August 12th aligned with a logged login on Anderson's office terminal. Blake pointed to the evidence. As you can see, Your Honor, the header information indicates the message was crafted on a desktop client, not a mobile device. Additionally, metadata reveals it passed through an email-to-text gateway associated with Mr. Anderson's work email address. We then traced anomalies in the Wi-Fi connection logs, showing that Mr. Anderson's workstation was the source. Judge Caprio's eyebrows arched. This is significant. Ms. Hernandez, does the state wish to respond to this finding? Hernandez stood with hesitant deliberation. Your Honor, while this is compelling evidence that Mr. Combs was not personally responsible for sending those texts, we still have additional transactions to examine. However, this finding does require us to reevaluate the CFO's role and potentially shift our focus to charges against him. Ellis rose, a faint smile touching his lips. Your Honor, the defense has long maintained that Mr. Combs was not the author of those incriminating directives. Now that we have conclusive proof, we request that the court strike Exhibit A3 from the record as invalid evidence against Mr. Combs. We further move to subpoena Mr. Anderson to testify under oath regarding his motivations. Judge Caprio regarded both attorneys. Ms. Hernandez, Mr. Ellis, the court accepts the forensic analysis. Exhibit A3 is hereby disqualified as evidence against Mr. Combs. Furthermore, I will issue a bench warrant for Mr. Anderson to appear for testimony. We shall subpoena financial records associated with his personal accounts to trace the diverted funds. At this point, the direction of the case shifts dramatically. The bailiff stepped forward to remove Exhibit A3 from the evidence board. Diddy sat back, relief mingling with nervous anticipation. Hernandez sank into her chair, consulting with her team in hushed tones. Judge Caprio addressed the gallery. Friends, family, and observers, the evidence now suggests that the CFO orchestrated a scheme, forging Mr. Combs's name and using his reputation to mask fraudulent transactions. The court will pause briefly to allow the prosecution to summon additional witnesses related to Mr. Anderson's malfeasance. We will resume after a 15-minute break. As the judge exited through the side door, shouts erupted among reporters. This just in, Diddy's innocence on one major charge confirmed. CFO steals money, frames Diddy. Case turns on forensic evidence. People scrambled to record videos, interview witnesses, and gather reactions. When the court reconvened 15 minutes later, new faces occupied the witness stand. A seasoned IRS agent and a whistleblower from the foundation's accounting department, both prepared to testify on Mr. Anderson's wrongdoing. The agent, her badge glinting under the lights, presented a series of bank records showing suspicious wire transfers to a personal account held by Anderson's spouse. She explained how she had traced funds from global media promotions invoices that matched the amounts withdrawn from the foundation. The whistleblower, a young man named Marcus Young, no relation to the detective, looked nervous as he approached. He described how Anderson had coerced him to backdate invoices and sign off on payments for non-existent services. He told me, "Marcus, no one will question someone named Diddy. Just make the paperwork look legit." For months, I did as I was told because I feared losing my job. But then I saw children waiting in line at a food drive that had no money to serve them. That's when I decided I had to come forward. His eyes welled with tears as he recalled kids shivering in coats that never arrived. Judge Caprio listened intently. "Mr. Young, did you record any conversations or save copies of these forged invoices?" Young nodded, handing a folder to the clerk. "Yes, Your Honor. I have versions of the documents before and after Anderson's alterations, as well as an audio recording where he instructs me to forge Mr. Combs's signature." He swallowed hard. "I did it once because I was scared. When I realized what he was doing, I saved everything on a flash drive in case I ever needed to prove the truth." The judge directed the clerk to enter these materials as exhibits. Hernandez rose, determined. "Your Honor, these exhibits confirm a direct conduit for misappropriation. Anderson created false documentation, manipulated Mr. Combs's reputation, and used the foundation's funds for personal enrichment. We now move to charge Mr. Anderson with wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit theft. Additionally, we ask the court to evaluate whether Mr. Combs displayed any negligence in oversight." Ellis rubbed his temples. "Your Honor, the defense asserts Mr. Combs's lack of knowledge and reliance on the CFO's expertise. We will present evidence of his oversight measures, quarterly board reviews, external audits conducted prior to Anderson's tenure, and public statements emphasizing transparency. We argue he is the victim here." Judge Caprio nodded. "I will set a schedule for Mr. Anderson's arraignment and incorporate these new charges. Meanwhile, this court's focus will remain on whether Mr. Combs can be deemed complicit in any additional suspicious transfers not yet explored. Mr. Anderson's upcoming testimony will be crucial." Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the back of the courtroom. A middle-aged man in a rumpled suit, formerly seated among the gallery, rose and shouted, "Wait! I have evidence against the CFO." The bailiffs moved to restrain him, but Judge Caprio raised his hand. "Sir, you may approach, but please speak only after you are sworn in." The man's voice quavered as he took the witness stand. "I'm Peter Green, a retired auditor who did contract work for the foundation last year. I found discrepancies in payroll records, dozens of employees listed as charity volunteers who were never deployed. I tried to confront the CFO, and he threatened to have me arrested for trespassing if I spoke further. I have copies of those records. Judge Caprio watched carefully as Green handed over boxes of paper files and a portable hard drive. Hernandez leaned forward, intrigued by this unexpected testimony. Green explained that he had flagged over $150,000 in bogus payroll expenses, which he believed Anderson had paid to offshore accounts. He had left in disgust and hired a lawyer, but had feared intimidation. With Green's testimony, the narrative expanded. Not only had Anderson forged invoices, but he had also created fictitious employees and payroll to siphon funds. Each revelation deepened the labyrinth of deceit. In the background, Diddy's shoulders sagged with relief, tinged by shock. His world, once defined by studio lights and sold-out shows, had been quietly manipulated by someone he trusted implicitly. Judge Caprio paused to let the weight of these developments sink in. The court now has substantial evidence that Mr. Anderson orchestrated a multifaceted fraud scheme. Ms. Hernandez, Mr. Ellis, summarize your positions regarding Mr. Combs's remaining culpability. Hernandez spoke first. Your Honor, in light of this new testimony, the state concedes Mr. Combs did not personally orchestrate the fraudulent transactions. However, we maintain that his lack of diligence in supervising the CFO constitutes negligence. We ask the court to consider imposing oversight requirements beyond mere fines. Ellis rose confidently. Your Honor, the defense contends that Mr. Combs instituted regular audits, but Anderson actively circumvented those measures. Further, Mr. Combs's direct involvement in charity work is well documented. We ask the court to clear him of all charges, except to the extent he must contribute to restitution for any residual shortfall due to managerial oversight. Judge Caprio nodded thoughtfully. We have reached a pivotal moment. The evidence now suggests Mr. Combs was deceived, but questions remain about his supervisory responsibilities. I will take a brief recess to reflect before instructing counsel on the next steps. We will reconvene in 1 hour. As the gavel fell, there was a collective exhale, like an audience at a play realizing the plot twist was far greater than expected. Reporters whispered into their microphones, scribbled feverishly on notepads, and updated live feeds. For Diddy, the turning point was unmistakable. From presumed villain to possible victim, his future hung in the balance. When the trial resumed after the hour-long recess, the weight in the room had shifted. People still whispered, but now the tone was one of contemplation rather than speculation. Judge Caprio returned, seated himself, and looked directly at Diddy, whose eyes reflected a mixture of gratitude and lingering worry. Mr. Combs, the judge began in his calm, resonant tone, we have heard extensive testimony. We know your foundation was infiltrated by Mr. Anderson, whose schemes diverted significant funds. We also understand you were not the direct architect of these crimes. However, as the head of this organization, you bear a degree of responsibility for ensuring that no malicious actor can exploit your resources. This brings me to the matter of resolution. How do we balance justice for the victims, accountability for those at fault, and compassion for someone who has otherwise demonstrated a lifetime of charitable deeds? The judge paused, scanning the courtroom, letting the question linger. ADA Hernandez rose. Your Honor, the state recommends that Mr. Combs pay a fine in the amount of $300,000, reflecting the approximate amount diverted under Mr. Anderson's scheme. We also recommend that he be required to oversee the Foundation's restructuring for 2 years, ensuring external audits and checks are implemented. Finally, we ask that he contribute an additional $100,000 in community service grant money to the Foundation to immediately bolster shortfall programs. Ellis stood to respond. Your Honor, While the defense concedes that restitution is necessary, we propose a modified remedy. We request that Mr. Combs be ordered to donate $200,000 directly to the Foundation's beneficiaries over the next 2 years, reflecting his commitment to righting wrongs. We further propose that he undergo ethics training and sponsor the hiring of an independent financial compliance officer who will report directly to the board. Beyond that, Mr. Combs has already lost immeasurably: damage to his reputation, emotional toll on his family, and harm to the beneficiaries who lacked resources while the fraud persisted. We ask the court to weigh these consequences in determining any fines or other penalties. Before Judge Caprio spoke, Naomi Combs, a silent observer until now, rose and offered a brief statement. "Your Honor, I stand by my brother. I have seen his heartfelt efforts, his sleepless nights planning events, and his personal sacrifices. He never intended to defraud anyone. If a fine is required, I ask the court to consider that he is now personally invested in remedying the harm. The Foundation will resume its programs once funding is reinstated. My brother's heart is in the right place." The judge regarded Naomi with a soft nod before addressing Diddy. "Mr. Combs, you may speak." Diddy removed his baseball cap and rubbed his forehead. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but resolute. "Your Honor, I accept responsibility for the outcome of this trial. While I was deceived by someone I trusted, I know that in my position, I should have overseen operations more carefully. I've spent my life giving back, but I realize now that giving alone is not enough without safeguarding those gifts. If restitution is required, I will pay it. If oversight measures are needed, I will live by them. I vow to rebuild the Foundation, transparently, ethically, and to ensure the families who depended on us receive the help they deserve." His sincerity resonated. People in the gallery exchanged nods of approval. Some dabbed at tears. Hernandez, though an opponent in court, looked impressed by Diddy's humility. Ellis allowed himself a reluctant smile. Even Judge Caprio's eyes softened. The judge rose and approached the bench microphone. He spoke deliberately. "Based on all testimony and evidence, this court finds that Mr. Combs did not knowingly orchestrate the misappropriation of funds. Thus, the charge of willful fraud is hereby dismissed. However, as a leader, he failed to institute sufficient oversight to prevent this deception. Therefore, the court imposes the following remedies. 1. Restitution and fine. Mr. Combs shall pay a fine of $250,000 to be paid in equal quarterly installments over the next 2 years, dedicated to replenishing the Foundation's funds for programs that suffered. Additionally, he shall deposit $50,000 immediately to cover urgent needs missed due to the gap. Second Foundation. Oversight. Beginning immediately, Mr. Combs will oversee the appointment of an independent compliance officer, whose duties will include monthly audits, random spot checks, and quarterly public reporting of the Foundation's financial activities. These reports will be filed with the court. Third Ethics Training. Mr. Combs must complete 40 hours of certified nonprofit financial ethics and governance training within the next 6 months. Proof of completion will be filed with the clerk's office. Fourth Community Service Grant. An additional $100,000 will be earmarked for direct community grants. This money will be distributed to underfunded programs in disadvantaged neighborhoods, as approved by the new compliance officer. These measures are designed not only to ensure accountability, but to restore public trust. Judge Frank Caprio believes in redemption through action. When someone acknowledges faults and takes steps to correct them, society benefits. At these terms, Diddy exhaled, relief and resolve mingling on his face. "Yes, Your Honor, I accept these conditions wholeheartedly." He looked at his sister, who nodded encouragingly. Judge Caprio turned to ADA Hernandez. Ms. Hernandez, are these terms acceptable to the state? Hernandez rose and replied, Your Honor, the state concurs with the court's decision. We believe these remedies will address victims' needs and deter future misconduct. Ellis added, The defense is satisfied as well. Mr. Combs pledges full cooperation in implementing these reforms. Judge Caprio gave a final admonition. Mr. Combs, let this be a lesson to all who lead. Power and influence come with the duty of vigilance. I trust you will honor your word and rebuild what was lost with integrity. This court is adjourned. He tapped the gavel lightly, and the room erupted into applause, some hesitant, some joyful, but all acknowledging a sense of closure and hopeful redemption. After the gavel's final echo, many lingered in their seats, digesting the outcome. Reporters scrambled to capture Diddy's first words as a free man in the context of this trial's resolution. But Judge Caprio remained on the bench, allowing a few moments for the silence to settle. Then, in a resonant voice, he offered a closing reflection. Today we witnessed a journey from suspicion to vindication, from heartbreak to redemption. In the world of celebrity and philanthropy alike, we often fall prey to either hero worship or vilification without pausing to examine the nuances. Mr. Combs's case reminds us that trust can be weaponized and generosity can be exploited. He paused and lowered his gaze to the gallery. The Combs Foundation began with a mission of hope, feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, educating the underprivileged. That mission should not be tarnished by the actions of a single individual who acted outside the law. Rather, it should motivate us to build systems that protect the vulnerable. Judge Caprio continued, We must remember the faces behind the numbers, the children who went hungry, the families left wondering why promised resources vanished. To those who bore the brunt of this scandal, let today's verdict signify not only justice, but also a renewed commitment to serve. The funds set aside for restitution will arrive where they belong, in communities, in hearts that once believed their hope had been erased. And as those dollars flow, a legacy of compassion can be restored. He gestured toward Diddy, seated with a humbled expression. Mr. Combs, your life's work should not be defined solely by this chapter. The evidence has shown that you were deceived by someone you trusted, your CFO, who orchestrated a web of lies. But you also bear responsibility for failing to detect these deceptions sooner. Today's remedies, fines, structured oversight, ethics training, are not punishments for malice, but for oversight deficiency. The law does not absolve us of mistakes simply because our intentions are pure. Instead, it challenges us to do better. Judge Caprio scanned the courtroom once more, locking eyes with a few attendees. Each of you in this room, witnesses, family members, donors, volunteers, and curious onlookers, is a guardian of trust. Whether you lead a multinational empire, a local nonprofit, or a small neighborhood initiative, you must implement safeguards, reviews, audits, transparent reporting. These are not burdens, but lifelines that connect generosity with accountability. He leaned in slightly, voice softening. I have hope that from today's events, a stronger foundation will emerge. A foundation where families hungry for assistance will find nourishment again, where children can attend schools without fear, where medical clinics operate without funding gaps. Those positive outcomes are possible because of the systems we now require Mr. Combs to adopt. A hush fell as the judge's words settled into deep resonance. A few tears glimmered in the eyes of people who had been directly affected by the Foundation's shortfall. Some wiped them away, determined to see this as a turning point. Judge Caprio continued, Let us not forget the human dimension of justice. Our laws and procedures exist to maintain social order, but justice at its core is about healing. We heal when we acknowledge wrongdoing, when we accept consequences, and when we take tangible steps to rectify harm. Today, Mr. Combs took those steps in earnest. The court hopes he emerges stronger, not only as a philanthropist, but as a steward of truth and transparency. He closed by saying, "To the Combs Foundation's beneficiaries, the void left by this scandal will soon be filled. To Mr. Anderson, currently awaiting his own trial, know that betrayal carries consequences. To those in leadership positions everywhere, consider this a call to vigilance. And to the public, remember that even our heroes can falter, yet redemption remains possible when a person chooses accountability over concealment." Judge Caprio nodded solemnly. May we all learn from this trial that goodwill, when paired with oversight, can create an unbreakable bond of trust. Court is adjourned. As he stepped down, the room seemed to exhale collectively, like an audience leaving a cathartic performance. Families stepped forward to console one another, reporters tentatively approached Diddy's attorney for comments, and volunteers from the foundation exchanged vows to rebuild. For a moment, time seemed suspended, as everyone processed the journey from scandal to resolution. Beyond the courtroom walls, U.S. news outlets would the next morning headline, "Judge Caprio's compassionate justice restores Diddy's reputation," and "CFO's deception unmasked, lessons in trust and oversight." Social media buzzed with opinions, some praising Diddy's humility, others marveling at Judge Caprio's balanced approach. Yet, amid the online cacophony, the real narrative emerged. A community once betrayed found a pathway to restoration, and a celebrity once vilified found a chance at redemption. Thank you for watching. If you've read through to the end, take a moment now to write your thoughts below. What surprised you most about this trial? How would you balance compassion with accountability? Which aspects of this case resonate with your own experiences? We look forward to hearing your stories, and as always, stay curious, stay compassionate, and stay committed to truth. Until next time, this is Judge Frank Caprio's Courtroom, where justice finds its heart.